Good afternoon. We wait 1 minute again before starting, just to permit all people to connect. Good afternoon to everybody, and welcome to this webinar organized by EW Nutrition. I'm very happy that to have the possibility to present this and to be hosting this webinar because the argument is very important. We'll speak with an important professor about mycotoxin and contamination in feed and raw materials in terms of mycotoxin and bacteria toxins. Therefore, the argument will be toxic risk management. My role in EW Nutrition, my name is Claudio Campanelli. I'm Italian. My role is Regional Technical Manager Europe in EW Nutrition, and I will have a presentation regarding toxic risk management. With me, of course, there are other three panelists and the host in the same time. Therefore, I will introduce firstly Professor Johanna Fink-Gremmels, and Professor Johanna Fink-Gremmels was trained as a veterinarian and already in her postdoc period. She was interested in hepatotoxicity and in aflatoxins. Along with her professional career as board certificate specialist in veterinary pharmacology and toxicology, and full professor at Utrecht University in Netherlands. She focused very much on food and feed contamination and food and feed safety. This topic included, of course, mycotoxin and bacteria toxin and their detrimental effects on the animal health and productivity. She's the author of more than 300 well-cited scientific articles and book chapters, but still enjoys the practical field work and technicians activities. So Johanna, if you want to introduce yourself, please.
Yes, hello. Hello, my name is Johanna Fink-Gremmels. So you will see me later on in my presentation with all the details. And I'm very happy to join this seminar, which is now given as a webinar due to the difficult times we are approaching at the moment. And I'm very happy to be back to you later on with more details. Thank you.
Thank you, Johanna. The other panelist is Dr. Mahendran. Dr. Mahendran has completed Masters in Animal Nutrition. He's having 20 years experience in poultry and dairy industry. And he's having hand-on experience in feed milling, diet optimization, and poultry management. Now he's working with EW Nutrition as the Regional Technical Manager, South Asia. Mahendran, if you want to say something about you.
Hello, I am Mahendran, working as a Regional Technical Manager in EW Nutrition. It's a nice platform to meet you all, and I welcome to join for this webinar. Thank you.
Thank you, Mahendran. And the third panelist is Mr. Klaus Krüger, who is the head of product management in EW Nutrition. Klaus, you want to say something?
Yes, good afternoon, dear customers and prospects. Greetings from still sunny Germany. My name is Klaas Krüger. I'm happy to join this webinar now as a panelist. So I will mainly listen to the nice presentations which we scheduled, and then I'm happy to join into the discussion. As Claudio said, I'm the team lead of product management and hope to get a lot of insights by today. I'm very unhappy that I cannot join you in person, which was planned initially that we go there. We will repeat this for sure. So Claudio, please take over again. Thanks for invitation and thanks for hosting. Everybody have fun, and I hope everybody learns a lot. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Klaas. Now we can start with the first presentation made by Dr. Mahendran, and it will be followed by the presentation of Dr. Johanna Fink-Gremmels and my presentation. After all presentation, we'll have the possibility to answer to all questions that you can put in the session called Q&A, question and answer. Therefore, feel free to write every question you want, and in the end of the presentation, we can answer to, I hope, as many as possible questions. In the end, also, we will launch a poll, and I will ask you kindly to fill the poll in order to understand if you appreciated the webinar. So we can start with the first presentation. So please, Dr. Mahendran, it's your turn.
Thank you, Claudio, for your nice introduction. Again, welcome to all for today's webinar. Today webinar, there will be two presentations. One is by Claudio and Campanelli, and another by Professor Johanna Fink-Gremmels. So before entering into the presentation, I take opportunity to introduce vision and mission of EW Nutrition. EW Nutrition vision is how we focus on critical industry challenges, that is health and welfare of animals and humans, lower antibiotic use, continuous business profitability, harmful substances reduction, and to improve production efficiency. Again, our mission is our purpose. It is to mitigate the impact of antimicrobial resistance by providing comprehensive animal nutrition solutions. Our core values are more than business. This is how practically we work. That is, customer first, act respectfully, seek excellence, and be curious. EW Group is a German-based company. It's started by member of a family of leading agribusinesses. EW Group is focusing on 4 major fields, that is animal nutrition and animal health, mainly for vaccines, food production, and animal breeding or genetics. Here, animal genetics in that group is a world leader in the field of broiler, layer, turkey, salmon, and tilapia breeding. Some known names in that group are Aviagen, Highline, Lohmann, H&N, and Aquagen. EW Nutrition is a part of EW Group, focusing on feed supplement. EW Nutrition started in the year 2004. Since then, company is growing organically and mergers and acquisition. The recent development is in 2017, EW Biotech. It is a scale-up center. It is converting concept to products, from where we are developing our enzymes. We are launching our enzymes. EW Nutrition is present in all major markets with our own personnel. We are near our customers with technical and commercial resources. EW Nutrition globally having 4 production units located strategically to meet the customer needs. 1 production unit in Des Moines, Iowa in US, Curitiba in Brazil, Bremen in Germany, and Gifu in Japan. EW Nutrition is committed to research and development. That is a basis for its growth. We have R&D center in Brazil, Germany, and Japan. High throughput research laboratory in Cologne in Germany, and scale-up center in Luna, Germany, there where we are converting our concept into our products. We have R&D center in Japan, where we are concentrating on development of, in the field of immunology. With this short introduction, we will move to today's presentation. Now over to Claudio. Claudio, please take over.
Claudio, I cannot hear you. Can you hear me? Okay, okay. As I cannot hear anything.
Yeah, Professor, I'm hearing.
Yes, but Claudio does not hear us. Shall I continue? Because I think he has a...
Yes, I'm hearing.
So I share my screen and start my presentation. Is that okay for you?
Very good.
Absolutely. We have already presented you. Yes.
Okay. So I go on full screen. Can you see me? Everybody? Yeah, it's a pity that I cannot hear anybody. Give me a sign that's okay.
Yes, Professor.
Yes,
it's okay.
It's okay.
Okay. I'm sorry that I couldn't hear you. So I'm starting my presentation, and you see my title on the occurrence and impact and mitigation of mycotoxins in poultry. And what the meaning of my presentation is that I do give you a kind of an introduction to the subject. What does it mean, mycotoxins? What does it mean for poultry health, and what have we achieved in the last years? And now I try to change my slide, which does, yes, it works. So give a kind of a general position of mycotoxins. They belong to the large class of undesirable substances in animal feeds, and they can affect health and productivity as well as food safety. And if you look into the text blocks below, you see all undesirable substances in animal feeds in a very, very brief description. We have the class of environmental pollutants, which you see here on the left-hand side, with heavy metals, with dioxin, pesticides, persistent pesticides that might be there in the environment. We have, of course, the toxic plants and their metabolites, which occur worldwide, but at different levels. Gossipur was an issue in India for a long time, but also we have toxic alkaloids and saponins. And on the right-hand side, you see the topic of today, the microbes and the microbial contaminants, which include the pathogens, which we will only briefly discuss, but particularly microbial toxins. Well, we have the endotoxins and the mycotoxins as major classes, and these I will discuss a little bit today to indicate what is their impact on health and productivity, and on the long term also on the profitability of your business operation. Mycotoxins are true natural toxins produced by fungal species. You all do know this. But to understand them, it is a very complex matter. We have on the left-hand side, we start with the early plant growth, and this may result in pre-harvest contamination of plant material and finally of the crops, of course, we harvest. Pre-harvest contamination is particularly important for all Fusarium species. Fusarium molds live in the soil. There are a major variety of species occurring worldwide, but particularly in the northern hemisphere, and they can produce a large variety of toxins. We come to this in a minute. Why they are producing these toxins is that the plant is stressed by climate, environmental conditions, depending on good agricultural practice, what we generally have as a GAP. When we then look into these Fusarium toxins in a few minutes in some more detail, we see that the Fusarium is really a plant pathogen. So it also modifies the plant, and I will come to this little formula you see on top in the middle column in a few minutes, because these plant fungal interactions result in modified mycotoxins, and the presentation and how many, the amount of these modified mycotoxins is very important for our risk assessment to poultry health. It depends on plant varieties and gives us conjugation with different substrates like glucose, and this causes a problem in the analytical procedure. But before I show this in some more detail, I want to go to the right column, and there you have what is most important in your country and in Asia is post-harvest contamination. Post-harvest contamination in silos or whatever you store grains and cereals, you harvest it, is mainly conducted by Aspergillus species, Penicillium species, but also by Ardenaria, these black molds you see sometimes. They are also toxin producers, but perhaps less important in terms of animal health. But the overall result is that animal feeds might be contaminated with multiple toxins, and this rate of contamination depends on storage conditions, on moisture at harvest, and temperature during storage. Now, I was asked to tell a little bit more about these masked mycotoxins because they are an absolutely invisible risk. And you see here's a formula I had on the other slide again. And as a model, I used the DUN molecule. And this is this molecule. I do not see if you can see my cursor on the left-hand side. And you see here on the right-hand side, there is a glucose molecule adhered to the DUN. And this is very typical for corn, for maize. And this is done by the plant during the growth period, during the pre-harvest stage, so in the living plant. And these conjugated toxins are very, very difficult to detect. And so we have to learn a few statements. In a living plant, mycotoxins are excreted by fungi into the plant tissue. The plant considers this as toxic to plant cells and try to detoxify. And the detoxification a plant can do is a conjugation This means modification of mycotoxins as the protective mechanisms of the plant. And this applies particularly to fusarium toxins, which are mainly linked to glucose, 1 or 2, because there can be a glucose here and there can be a glucose there. So we have monoglucose derivatives, but up to 5 molecules of glucose can be added to DON. And this is called a masking procedure, because with these glucose molecules, DON absolutely changes its physicochemical properties and cannot be extracted with routine methods. So these modified mycotoxins are not, and that's the most important message, are not detected by common analytical procedures. However, when material containing these glucose conjugated molecules is ingested, glucose will be separated by cleavage by enzymes, and the toxin is in the animal and contribute to the total animal burden of undesirable mycotoxins. This is a very important mechanism to all fusarium toxins, so it's bound to pre-harvest contamination. This mechanism does not occur when we have fungal invasion during storage, because conjugation reactions can only be done by a living plant. Now, to summarize, what we have to keep in mind always when talking about adverse effect of mycotoxins is that we have these 2 stages I already discussed, pre-harvest and post-harvest, and we have to consider that mycotoxins are chemical substances. It seems to be so simple, but customers have to understand that these chemicals cannot be destroyed by any normal procedures. They are toxic to all animals, they are non-immunogenic, so animals cannot develop a tolerance, but as chemical substances, they are heat stable, so they are not or hardly degraded during processes, so extrusion, expansion, pelleting. They are acid stable, so it had also no effect of drinking water acidification. A lot of poultry business said, yes, I give some mixtures of acid to the drinking water so I protect my animals. No, chemical substances cannot be inactivated by drinking water acidification. They are degradable by UV light. Most of the toxins are, and you know that traditionally toxin mitigation was also done by putting maize cobs on roofs of the houses to expose them to full sunlight, and this means UV. And they can be degraded in the animal by enzymes, and this knowledge is now used in using a number of probiotics or fermentation process as mitigation strategies for highly contaminated feed materials. Now, the history of mycotoxins started, of course, with the aflatoxins, detected first in Europe in the 1960s when imported groundnut meal caused an outbreak of disease in Turkey, so the name Turkey X disease referred to it at that time unknown disease. But due to this history with the aflatoxins, which are still a major economic problem throughout the world, and you see here's a figure which has been recently estimated that we have more than $5 billion per year only in the United States in economic losses. But this history explains why in the initial phase of mycotoxin research, people talked only about human health risks. Aflatoxin can cause cancer, liver cancer, and so the entire interest of the scientific world focused on the potential adverse effect on human individuals. And nobody was talking about the animals. In the 60s and in principle also in the 90s up to the beginning of this millennium, everybody was talking only about food safety and much less about feed safety. And feed safety was only considered in terms of potential residues, undesirable residues, in materials of animal origin like milk, meat, and eggs. What was totally neglected is the adverse effect on the animal itself. People were talking about acute intoxications, but that was put as a minor veterinary issue. Now, this scenario has changed a lot in the last 20 years, and we look now very specifically into what mycotoxins can do. And I will present you very, very few slides and rather briefly right now, how we started this mycotoxin research And, focusing first, of course, on the liver as a target organ, because aflatoxin B1, and you all know this, can cause serious damage to the liver of the animals. Pale and yellow livers and even precarcinogenic lesions you can see in poultry, particularly if you have a little bit older breeding animals, that would be visible. But we see that also aflatoxin causes bioduct proliferation, fatty liver syndrome. We have the ochratoxins, fumonisins, trichoticins. They all affect liver tissue to different extent. That was known. What we are focusing right now is the effects on low concentrations of these mycotoxins. And then you see what is given here on the right-hand side. We see the discoloration of the liver tissue. Particularly important is impaired weight gain, poor feed utilization, egg production drops, and the animal suffers from immune suppression, and an increased mortality is observed in the operation. And this is now here on the right-hand side what we are focusing on. What are the effects on animal health? Because the economic losses of mycotoxins are very, very important to the entire industry. Now, I could tell the same story for the other target site, like the kidney, which is a typical problem when we have Ochratoxin A contaminations in feed material. The kidneys are affected of the animals. You see here that they are swollen, that they are appearing much darker than normal, and that they have bleedings, hemorrhages in the kidneys. And we see that this is not only done by ochratoxin, but also by citrulline, penicillic acid, some fusarium toxins. And we have, again, the major problem is impaired growth rate. And with Ochratoxin A, animals tend to drink a lot, and we have a little bit of a wet litter syndrome. So this is the individual toxin as higher concentration. Often forgotten is also the effect on muscle tissue. I call this the forgotten endpoint, because that is the marketing quality is affected. If you have these spots on it, particular on it, this meat would have a poorer price. And again, if you see on the left-hand side, the number of toxins who can cause this syndrome is the ochratoxin. EPA is a forgotten toxin, cycloperazonic acid, produced by the same fungal species that produce also the aflatoxin, fumonisins, trichoticins, and all these in the background of the feed contamination may result in a poor meat quality, pale, soft, and exudative with hemorrhages, the so-called wooden breast syndrome. And here for the first time, I also have to mention residues. Because Ochratoxin A and cycloperazonic acid give undesirable residues in poultry meats at a higher frequency, but please always consider that these residues are still a very, very low percentage if you look to total human contamination of food materials directly ingested, and then I will talk about cereals and nuts, which are produced and ingested directly by the human individual. So it's still a very, very low percentage, and there are official documents from our Food Safety Authority here in Europe estimating that the total contribution of foods from animal origin to the human burden is less than 10%. We also have to talk about the reproductive system and the egg, which is a link to the next generation. Various mycotoxins give a reduced fertility, poor eggshell quality, reduced hatchability, and high embryo mortality. The mechanism behind this is oxidative stress and an impaired immune competence, and of course eggshell quality in effects on calcium metabolism and therefore poor shell quality. So this is something that is also seen by most of the mycotoxins we discussed here as yet fusarium toxins, but also at higher concentration with Ochratoxin A and even with aflatoxins. Now, target sites, which have been neglected also in the past, is something you might have not heard of. Everybody knows about these nephrotoxicity and hepatotoxicity and eggshell quality, but very recently, and then I talk about recently about the last 5 to 10 years, we focused very much in the research on the intestinal tract. And the intestinal tract is, of course, composed, you see here a little scheme of the animal, of different parts. But all parts, and I show you another slide in a minute, all parts contain a kind of a cell layer of epithelial cells. And these epithelial cells are a monolayer of cells, which is rather unusual in nature. It is only one barrier or one cell type. And in the middle of this slide, you see a magnification of one of these cells. You see here the basolateral side, so here would be the bloodstream, the animal, and here would be the nutrient stream on top of it, the so-called apical side. And these apical sites is, of course, the surface is enlarged here with the villi, and they are normally intended to increase the surface area that nutrients can be transported very easily. But nutrients are transported by active process, so-called carrier-mediated processes. So you have a glucose transport, you have amino acid transport, you have fatty acid transport. So the organism is equipped with all kinds of transporters helping to absorb the nutrients, because this is, of course, essential. Now, at this, the apical side here, or here in this slide, there is, of course, the total feed material. Now, feed material is never really clean, it is never really sterile. So the body has to protect itself. And here living are also the microorganisms and the larger intestines here, if you go, which are the ceca and the colon, where you have a lot of microflora. So the body has to be protected, that these microorganisms do not enter the body. They are important for the fermentation processes in the intestines, but they would be dangerous for the animal as such. And this is why nature invented something what we call tight junction complex. And these tight junction complex are very, you can see it like a spider web compounds, and they make barriers here and close these cells very, very tightly to each other. So it's a real barrier. Nothing can pass. Nutrients go by some pathways in between with these carriers, as I mentioned before. But this pathway, the paracellular pathway, across tight junctions, should be blocked and only available for a little bit of water. This is the healthy situation. When something affects this tight junction complex, then we have this paracellular transport of antigens and pathogens. And this is absolutely undesirable, because this is called leaky gut syndrome, which is a major risk for the animal to suffer from diseases and from unpleasant situations like modification of energy metabolism and absorption of nutrients. Now, these tight junctions have been identified as the first target for mycotoxins after oral ingestion. So if we have mycotoxins in feed materials, you know, these feed materials come here on the top side and disrupt this system. And this brought us to a broader understanding why we have so many adverse effects of mycotoxins. Because mycotoxins impair the intestinal integrity and the immune competence. You know that there are numerous publications showing on the immunosuppressive effects of mycotoxins. And that has been measured with blood tests and with all kinds of measures. What is more important is to understand that these intestinal tissues harbor 60 to 7% of the immune competence. And this is what you have, that is a message really to take home. You see here again on this slide, you see the epithelial cell layers. I had in magnification before. And you see the big lymph nodes here. You see the dendritic cells. You see all kinds of immune cells. They are all sitting directly in the intestinal tissue. And the mycotoxins work on this level. And this means if you see them, like DON, deoxyribonucleic, nivalenol, aflatoxins, ochratoxins, fumonisins, they all work negatively on the tight junctions, disrupt the tight junctions, and dysregulate the entire system. UNT2 toxins, zearalenone, pectin work also on the mucus layer, which is another challenge. So this is an additive effect in terms of the adverse reaction of the body. And we have even toxins like Ochratoxin A and Aflatoxins, which have also a direct effect on the lymph nodes. So this all together makes the animal extremely vulnerable to infectious diseases, and also impairs the outcome of vaccination programs in all animal species. So if this system is not functioning properly, we have also seen that, for example, Gumboro disease vaccination or Newcastle disease vaccination was not as successful as it should have been. We published it, by the way, in a very nice article a couple of years ago. Now, what I had explained to you is what is now in the literature referred to as leaky gut. You know, when these tight junctions are open, you know, these here are blocked, then we have what we call a leaky gut. That is a common name. You see all the symbols here on the internet. And a leaky gut allows the transepithelial transfer of pathogens. This is the model of Salmonella typhimurium, where they measured passage rates. And if you see here the passage, but don't forget that it's log scale, seems to be minor risk. But if you see the inflammatory response here, and these are markers of inflammation, it has a big impact on the animal. And these kind of studies have been published already for Salmonella typhimurium, as it is here, but also for coccidia, which have, and this is the next slide, you see here, increased lesion scores and oocyte setting by coccidia. Again, you know, control animals not affected with mycotoxins, but as soon as they have a bit of DON in the diet, you see that the scores are getting absolutely higher. If you have fumonisin, exactly the same effect. And if you have both mycotoxins in a formulated feed material, you see that you have still a high, very high shedding related to these gut leakage. So this has really a dramatic impact on the animal. And you see that otherwise subclinical infection become very dramatic for the animal, and that is what you see in daily practice. Now, leaky gut has also another risk. And leaky gut, and I told you in the very initial slide, that it allows the transfer of antigens and pathogens. Now, with Salmonella, I showed you a pathogen, but in daily life, if you have a very optimal operation, Salmonella counts would be low. But still the risk is there because leaky gut enables also the passage of endotoxins. Now, I do not know if you are fully familiar with the term endotoxins. Endotoxins are natural substances which occur here in the outer membrane of gram-negative bacteria, particularly E. coli, but also all kinds of bacteria that have a gram-negative structure, because it is a polysaccharide and very typical for gram-negative bacteria. Endotoxin, also called LPS, because that's a chemical name, lipopolysaccharide. So that is lipopolysaccharide, is a substance that is regularly in our intestines. Every individual, animal or human, has endotoxin in his intestines due to the fact that always in a normal procedure of ingestion and eating and starvation periods in between. So if you have just food withdrawal for a few hours, you will have some endotoxin in your intestines. No problem, because it stays in the intestine. But if you have a leaky gut, suddenly these endotoxin can pass from the intestinal lumen into the body. Now, if it reaches the body, it will come first to the liver, and the liver has mechanisms to clear the endotoxin. But if it appears on a larger scale, this natural defense mechanism of the liver do not work properly. And then the body reacts with a total inflammatory cytokine burst. So it's a big infectious inflammation. It's not a clear infection, it is an inflammatory response that affects the entire animal. And this is again what contributes to the adverse effect of mycotoxins, and that we have to understand also what had changed. And I'm trying to get a little bit to a summary. Having understood these mechanisms of leaky gut, and that mycotoxins, almost all mycotoxins, have this effect on tight junctions and produce a leaky gut syndrome, particularly at low concentration over a longer period. So in principle of good quality feed material, we still have to understand that the effects on the animal can be rather undesirable, even dramatic, because when we focus now on gut health and immunity, we see already an impairment at very low concentrations of mycotoxins in animal diet. And here's the hidden message behind it. Yes, it is not only an individual mycotoxin. In a normal diet, we have more than one mycotoxin. And it is this cooperation, the unhappy cooperation in the effect of mycotoxin exposure and LPS. So in principle, we switch from these acute signs, which you can find in every textbook, that's T2 toxin, of course, you know this, it is a well-known picture, to something that is moldy feed material with minor spots of mold contamination, but that are detrimental because we go from the acute intoxication, which we call, so in principle, to invisible health risks affecting productivity, and that means also profitability, by reducing feed utilization, weight gain, having adverse metabolic effects, that particular glucose metabolism is affected. We have these immunological effects. Remember the slide I showed you that the major immune response is in the gut. And we have reproductive effects, again, due to metabolic imbalances. So this is in principle what is now the current understanding of the mycotoxin challenge. And we see the vulnerability is not only concentration dependent, but also dependent on the different production stages. And we first learned, that the hatchability of chicken is affected. This multi-toxin exposure gives the chicken in principle a poor start. But we have recently also conducted various experiments with artificial heat stress. So that's an experimental unit we were using where we had very, very good control of temperature and light control and humidity in experimental little units. And then you see something that the sum of stress factors, heat stress, leaky gut, intestinal infection, duration of exposure, multi-mycotoxin challenge, and LPS are this what is really the real life scenario. And this is what is affecting our industry, I think, the most. And this leads also to the vulnerability to infectious diseases, the undesirable use of antibiotics, which we in principle do not want to use, and microbial imbalance. But this is also, understanding this also makes it understandable why we go into different intervention strategies. Mycotoxin binders are on the market for about 20 years. But mycotoxin binders, like the mineral clay products and the sodium, potassium, aluminum silicates, which are the most prominent products, are still important. Yes, they are. Examples are bentonites, cipolites, montmorillite, phenolphthaleins, and so on. You all know them. They are in various products on the market. They can absorb aflatoxin, and what is important, they can also bind LPS. This is something that is a recent development, and you will see later on in the presentation that we now demand that mycotoxin binders will be tested also for binding of these LPS, these endotoxins I explained to you, that is so important for the overall health of the animal. Now, a normal compound has also so-called organic polymers, so that are yeast cell-derived products, where in principle the 1,3-beta glucanes are the most important chemical group in these natural products. And they are all derived from yeast cells, and you have different on the market. We see now appearance of humic acid products like humic and fulvic acid as natural mixtures, and they stabilize in principle not only the absorption rates, so the reduced absorption of Ochratoxin A cevalenone and T2 toxin, which are poorly bound by this class of mineral clays, but they have also the effect of stabilizing the gut microbiome. So they have a prebiotic effect, and that is highly desirable to stabilize the animals and to increase productivity. They are immune protective, and they have a moderate anti-inflammatory effect. And when you go to LPS, what I mentioned before, inflammation is a big issue, or an inflammatory response is a big issue in the overall health of the animal. You can use also lactobacilli, which is very popular, of course, in Asian country. You have been both in your traditional food materials. They are now increasingly used also in feed fermentation. We have numerous strains on the market. You can have been proven to be effective, and they can prevent the absorption of mycotoxins in the intestinal tract through to adhesion, so adsorption of these mycotoxins to bacterial cell walls. And again, they are gut health stabilizers and have a probiotic meaning. So this is desirable in terms of promoting and boosting animal health. I should not close before mentioning also the phytochemicals, because again, they are also known, particularly in India, of course, from the local ethnomedicine. You have highly developed in this part of the world herbal remedies. Curcumin, of course, is a standard compound. Resveratrol is the most potent antioxidant we know, and silymarin, which is known as a hepatoprotective compound. These are found now as a co-medication, as antioxidant, prebiotic effects, and immunomodulators, and even hepatoprotective, that you can add as feed additives to your concept of mitigating the mycotoxin and LPS challenge. So you see on the market mixtures and blends of all the different classes coming up and having additive and synergistic effects. And this is something that we can really recommend. So to have a number of take-home messages to close my presentation, mycotoxin contamination is a global problem, and it is still increasing. The increase in every continent sees this of mycotoxin contamination is related to changes in agricultural practice, monocultures, minimum tillage, plant genetics, and climate change. Don't forget climate change makes that we have still an increase in the prevalence of mycotoxins worldwide. Of course, poor storage conditions with high humidity, which you have in this part of your world, and the floodings is another complicating factors, and the lack of sufficient feed preservation. That means the instability of propic acid compounds when we have a high fermentation activity in the feed material has to be considered as well. Now, take-home messages in terms of animal health is that we have to increase the awareness of customers to understand that we are not always seeing acute clinical intoxications. Yes, we can see an increased mortality, but not clinical signs a lay person can immediately identify. But we have the need to intervene also to reduce the economic losses when the animals appear from the outside healthy, so low-level exposure. The adverse effects in poultry operations are predominantly reduced weight gain. You know this, reduced feed utilization and poor immune competence, undesirable use of antibiotics, undesirable effects on the intestinal tract, and that means explains, of course, weight gain and feed utilization that are affected. We have as a mechanism, I very much stress today, that the mycotoxins affect the intestinal barrier and thereby boosting a pro-inflammatory, so an inflammation reaction of the entire body. And this is done together with the bacterial endotoxins. This costs a lot of energy to keep the animal alive against these challenges of inflammation. And this again we see in poor weight gain. And therefore in the risk management, we always recommend now mixtures of mycotoxin LPS mitigating substances that can be recommended now more or less for routine use in poultry operations. And of course, it is still important to do some analytical methods and differential diagnosis what's going on. But you see in many, many parts of the world that this is has become a kind of a routine procedure. Now with this, I will close my presentation. You see here some slides from my university. It's a very green appearance of the Netherlands because we are close to the shore and we have a lot of rain, and a very modern university with more than 30,000 students and a strong research program on the One Health, of course, antibiotic use and feed preservation. And with this, I would like to thank you for your attention to my lecture, and I give the screen back to the presenter and hope that we can come back later on with your questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Johanna, for the fantastic presentation. So we have already 26 questions. Therefore, maybe if you or maybe also Dr. Mahendran want to start maybe answering by writing, typing the answer, we can do. In the meantime, we go on with my own presentation that now I share with you. So, can you see the presentation? Yes. So,
sorry to interrupt. I cannot see the questions.
Okay, you have to.
We can do that later. We can do that later. Just have your presentation first.
Okay, okay. Okay, thank you very much. So we can start with these. Just 1 second, because. Okay. I come back to. How to come back to? Yeah. Okay. So in the end, I would like to speak with you about the risk interpretation and the toxin risk management. Therefore, I would like to start with some questions. How accurate is your risk? How much, sorry, I changed. Sorry, I made a mistake.
Can you not go to the next?
Yeah. I cannot come back to the.
Close it and open again.
Sorry for these problems.
Can you close it?
Yeah, but I cannot do it. Sorry. I cannot go to. Can you call maybe Marianne just 1 second, because I apologize. There is a problem in the. Sorry, I'm not able to come back to the presentation here.
Yeah. So you need to show the presentation?
Yeah.
Okay.
It's here, but I have to come back to the first slide. Sorry, thank you very much, and sorry for the. I apologize for this problem. Okay, we can start again. So I was saying, what is, yeah, what is the toxin risk management? In the end, yes, we can have a different approach, different kind of approach in terms of toxin risk management. We can have a different kind of approach in terms of contamination of our raw material or feed. We can have to put extreme attention to sampling and to analyze our raw material, our feed. We can put extreme attention to interpret the data that we get from the laboratory.
Or maybe we can have fast sampling, not particularly accurate analysis. We can have simply just one single repetition, for example, or not having a follow-up about from the analysis that we made in laboratory. Or maybe we can also rarely make analysis of raw material, and we can analyze only few mycotoxins. No, we cannot see the symptoms in animal. We cannot control the symptoms in animal. Or maybe we can do simply nothing, and we can be sure that we are not the contamination of mycotoxin is not a problem of ours. So in the end, what is the toxic risk management? What is the real let's say interpretation that we have to give to our raw material, to our feed, and to give to the things that we give to our animals, just to understand and to interpret it in the right way, what is the contamination, and in order to know very well and to have a knowledge of the problem that we can have in our raw material or in feed, we can propose and we can have a solution about that. Therefore, the toxin risk management is, first of all, just 1 second, pointer. We can have practically, first of all, the identification of the risk. And our approach is to identify the risk first. How to identify the risk? First of all, it's important to have a right procedure to sampling the raw material or the feed that we want to analyze. And the most important is not only to have a right procedure, but to maintain the right procedure in the time. Then, of course, as soon as I get my sample, I would like to, of course, the most important thing is to identify the risk. Identify the risk and to understand what is the real contamination in raw material and feed. There is only one method. There is only one possibility to analyze the feed, to analyze the raw material. It's not important the method of analysis. It can be HPLC, can be a lateral flow device, can be a ELISA. It's not important the method, but important is that the data coming from the laboratory with the method that we use in analyzing our raw material, our feed, is statistically reliable. Therefore, we need absolutely statistically reliable data from the laboratory in order to understand what is the contamination. But then we have to absolutely take in consideration the interpretation of these data that we can get from the laboratory. Because from the laboratory, I have a paper with a list of numbers, 100 ppb of deoxynivalenol, 5,000 ppb of fumonisins, or whatever. But how to interpret this data? Because as Johanna Fink-Gremmels has said before, there are also the different possibilities that we can have. We have a synergistic effect between mycotoxins, different mycotoxins. We have synergistic effect between mycotoxin and also bacteria toxin, endotoxins, for example, but also alpha azotoxins or beta azotoxin from gram-positive bacteria. And we can have also the famous masked form of mycotoxin, therefore the mycotoxin conjugated with sugars, monosaccharides or disaccharides. Therefore, that are not, let's say, is not easy to read these. We have to research this kind of masked form of mycotoxin, otherwise we don't see the data. Then we have, of course, managing the risk, proposing and giving the right solution. Of course, getting data, getting analysis is important to have, of course, a clear idea of the feed and the raw material that we are managing for our farms, but also is important to get for the operator who take the samples and analyze continuously the sample to have a clear idea of what can be the contamination in the area that we are operating. In this case, we are speaking about India and Bangladesh. I would like to show you, for example, the data that we collected from January 2020 until the end of May 2020, and we got this situation. We collected, I just show you only the data related to aflatoxin and ochratoxin. In aflatoxin, for example, in this area, we collected 166 samples and 155 samples were positive to aflatoxin. And the average level of aflatoxin in the sample was 34 ppb, okay? And the maximum level we found is until 150 ppb. The threshold in poultry we consider as 10 ppb in feed. Therefore, okay, as average in a raw material, we are quite low, higher than the threshold that we consider. But the threshold is always referred to the single mycotoxin. But we have to take in consideration that can be a very big synergistic effect between also aflatoxin and other mycotoxin. One of them is, for example, ochratoxin. Also in ochratoxin, we got 46 samples, and in 46 samples, 40 samples were positive in ochratoxin, with the average of 19 ppb of contamination. And we consider 20 as a threshold of poultry, but this threshold has to take in consideration carefully, because of course we have to consider the synergistic effect and also the masked toxins that we can have in the feed. For the deoxynivalenol, which is typical to have a masked toxin, for example, we don't have so much problems because poultry is not really sensitive to the deoxynivalenol. The threshold we consider that less of 500 ppb of the deoxynivalenol we can consider not really a big risk. Therefore, in India and Bangladesh, we do not have a high contamination of DON, but we have to be careful about aflatoxin and ochratoxin. That data reflects practically what happened from July to December 2019, because if you see the contamination of aflatoxin and ochratoxin in India, Bangladesh, also we had a quite high level of average level of aflatoxin with a high level also at maximum data found. In ochratoxin, practically the same situation that we saw before. Okay, the average level was quite low and safety, but this really is the real problem in the area and keeps the real problem in the area, aflatoxin. Therefore, what to do? Of course, we have to propose solution about that. The solution pass through some products that we propose and programs that we have in terms of toxic risk management. And for programs, I mean to take in consideration all life cycle of the animal, broilers or layers or breeders, and take in consideration the best product with the best dosage. In correlation, of course, to the contamination of mycotoxins that I have in my raw materials and my feed. But that's because we want to decrease the impact of mycotoxin on the production and on the performance. Therefore, the right product in terms of course, the product are, let's say the feeds of the product are clay and e-cellulose, but also the liver support by silimarine. That's very important. To choose the right product in the right period of the life cycle with the right contamination is the secret and the key of to give a right toxic risk interpretation and to give a solution of the issues. Of course, what we want to do is to meet your expectation. That's clear. Therefore, to manage the health, we want you to manage the health and animal performance using your raw material. That's very important because not always the right raw material are available in the market, not always the right raw material are, let's say, available in terms of economical term as well. Therefore, it's important to choose the right raw material or more convenient raw material in the market and to manage the toxin risk by a toxin binder. But also protect your band by managing the effect of contamination. That's clear, because especially for feed producer, we want to go to the market with a clean product, with a product that don't give any problem to the animals and the animal performance. In the end, what is important is not important if there is a contamination of the oxynivalenol or fumonisin or aflatoxin or whatever. The most important thing that we have and we must maintain the intestinal integrity of the intestine of the animals. So Johanna Fink-Gremmels made a fantastic presentation about that, and she spoke about the integrity of the intestinal tract. And this is the most important thing, because this is direct correlated to the performance of animals, especially the subclinical symptoms and the subclinical losses in performance. Therefore, that's everything is translated in return of investment. That's clear. Everybody wants to spend money for a mycotoxin binder to have a return of investment, and this return of investment is made by performance of animals. Therefore, coming back to our cycle, toxic risk management, the sequence of toxic risk management passes through interpreting the risk, because as soon as I receive my data from the laboratory, I need absolutely to give an interpretation. Therefore, to give an interpretation, it means to understand what can be, for example, the synergistic effect of our mycotoxins with particular other kind of toxin or other mycotoxin. In this case, in this trial, for example, it's quite easy to understand that there is a synergistic effect between the oxynivalenol and the lipopolysaccharides produced by Salmonella typhimurium, which is a gram-negative bacteria, therefore produce lipopolysaccharide, because the lipopolysaccharide are part of the structure of the bacteria itself, part of the wall of the bacteria itself. Therefore, there is an interaction between the oxynivalenol and the lipopolysaccharides of Salmonella typhimurium. And that is measurable because in this case, we are measured the interleukin 1 beta, which is an inflammatory cytokine as a biomarker, and interleukin 6 in animal contaminated with 1 microgram per milliliter of the oxynivalenol, then Salmonella typhimurium challenge, and both situations. Therefore, we can see how the oxynivalenol interfering negatively with the already contamination by the Salmonella, by a gram-negative bacteria. That's very important because this is a sort of interpretation of the data. Okay, we have our data, we have our 300 ppb from laboratory of the oxynivalenol, but we have to understand that the oxynivalenol can have also a synergistic effect with other external, not external, internal, let's say, situations. But not only for endotoxin. In this trial, for example, we are speaking about a Clostridium perfringens that is not a gram-negative, but it is a gram-positive bacteria. Therefore, it doesn't have any lipopolysaccharides at the structure, but it produces an alpha azotoxin, a toxin is behaving in the external environment. So in case of necrotic enteritis lesions, we measure the number of animals with necrotic enteritis lesion, and the number of animals with necrotic enteritis, of course, was higher when we had not only Clostridium perfringens as a challenge present in the intestine, but also the oxynivalenol. Therefore, that's clearly as a synergistic effect between these trichotecene and gram-positive, in this case, bacteria. Therefore, it's important, it's absolutely important to have a toxin binder with, in general, with a high spectrum of capacity, of binding capacity. And this high spectrum of binding capacity is really important because the toxin binder has to be able to bind, yes, mycotoxins, yes, trichotechenes, but also lipopolysaccharides. Lipopolysaccharides are very important because are always present in the intestine. Therefore, in this trial, for example, made in Utrecht University, in comparison with some competitor products in the top level of competition that we have in the market, we can see that we tested in vitro, therefore in a solution with 50 microgram per milliliter of lipopolysaccharides, and we saw how can be the binding capacity, for example, of masses of gold with two different inclusion, 0.25% and 1% of inclusion against with this challenge of lipopolysaccharide that was the same for all products. Therefore, the capacity to bind lipopolysaccharide is a unique characteristic of our product in comparison to the competitors' one. Therefore, it's important to understand why we can manage the risk in the intestine considering also the bacteria toxin. In this case, for example, we did more because in this trial we not only simply considered the binding capacity of the product against lipopolysaccharides in vitro, but also we took the solution after the incubation with mastosorb and without mastosorb, and we let's say stimulate the intestinal tissue of swine in terms of production of inflammatory cytokines. In this case, were measured the interleukin 8, and we can see the level of interleukin 8 was higher in the when the tissue was treated with the solution without incubation with mastosorb gold. Therefore, because probably the level of lipopolysaccharides available to stimulate the interleukin were the number was higher in comparison to the solution treated with mastosorb gold. And that's also was measurable because we know, as already Johanna mentioned before, the lipopolysaccharides are practically connected with a tool-like receptor part of the intestine, and going down with a cascade of a reaction, we arrive to the nuclear factor Kb, which is one of the stimulator of the pro-inflammatory cytokines. This nuclear factor Kb can be measured because when is phosphorylated, therefore when is active to give the message to produce the inflammatory cytokine, is readable because if we put a colorant, red phenol, in the solution, we can, this red phenol is bound to nuclear factor Kb phosphorylated. Therefore, the results in the end, we can see here, for example, in the solution with simply endotoxin, we see a lot of red spots because these red spots is simply the nuclear factor Kb phosphorylated bound to the red phenol. Therefore, you can see how many nuclear factor phosphorylated active and ready to give the message to produce interleukin is higher in this part of the intestine, in this part of the tissues, considered in comparison to the same tissue, let's say, with a solution treated before with mastosorb gold in immunofluorescence pictures, let's say. And this is the negative control. You can see this exactly the cells of the intestine. Yeah. Therefore, okay, it's important to bind the lipopolysaccharide. Absolutely, it's important. The binder can be let's say active and efficient in binding lipopolysaccharide, but in the same time is also important to bind some particular mycotoxins that are not easy to be bound. For example, trichotoxins, for example, the deoxynivalenol. And in this scientific validation trial, we want to demonstrate how masters of gold is able to bind the deoxynivalenol in comparison also with the most important competitors present in the market. Not because made 100, the binding capacity of masters of gold in comparison in relation to this percentage of binding capacity, the other products in the market were absolutely lower. And this is important because in this trial we want to demonstrate how is the binding capacity of our product in comparison to the competitor's product in a particular time, which is in this case 10 minutes. The challenge was relatively high. We are speaking about 3,000 ppb for all mycotoxins, for all binders, with 0.1% of the inclusion of the binder. But the most important thing is that some products, especially in competitor product, were not able to bind or to destroy as a bioactivity the deoxynivalenol because the time was not enough. Because in the end, the deoxynivalenol is absorbing the first part of intestine of animals in a short time, between 5 to 10 minutes. Therefore, of course, it is absolutely useless to make an in vitro trial using 1 hour of time. In 10 minutes, the activity and the bioactivity of whatever is this one. Therefore, we can demonstrate in this case that masters of gold was absolutely more efficient in binding the deoxynivalenol and T2 toxin and there in comparison to the competitors. Okay, I would like to summarize what are the key factors of the masters of. The masters of contains, therefore, bentonite and yeast cell walls to bind efficiently myco and bacteria toxins. That's very important. But also contains silimarine. Silimarine is absolutely an important ingredient to support the liver and to stimulate the protein synthesis, but in the same time to decrease the hyperoxidation activity made by mycotoxins, because silimarine has its own antioxidant activity that fight against, of course, the activity of hyperoxidation led by mycotoxin. Therefore, okay, of course, in terms of quality, every batch of the product is absolutely standard and controlled and is compliant with the European Union requirements. The activity of bacteria toxin, endotoxin from gram-negativity is unique, really, because in comparison with competitors, we found in a scientific also validation trials that there is absolutely differences in binding endotoxin. Therefore, we continue to make scientific trials in vitro and in vivo in order to demonstrate that our product is very efficient in the market. So I would like to thank you very much, and I would open directly the section of question and answer. Therefore, I stop sharing. And I would invite Professor Fink-Gremmels and Dr. Mahendra to enter in the discussion. We have 42 questions. Therefore, please, Dr. Mahendra or Dr. Fink-Gremmels, feel free to start answering to the questions.
Okay, thank you very much, Claudia, for giving me the floor. I found later on during your presentation, I found that I could indeed see some of the questions addressed, and I start already to answer some that were easy to answer. But
Yeah.
perhaps I can start with those that I cannot answer by written in a few sentences. So there was one question addressed to me: what is the best combination of types of clay that are most efficient binding for mycotoxins in poultry?
Yes.
Now, this is a question you can answer, cannot directly answer. It's not one solution. The real answer to this is think about or consider the following. All products have all mineral clay products have a good efficiency against aflatoxins. They have a minor efficiency, or you have to look in the demonstration of the efficacy for other toxins like Ochratoxin A. They are very, very little efficient against barium toxins. So this is some criteria for selection. And please also check the available data, whether or not a product has been tested for LPS binding. I think Claudia's presentation made it very, very clear that LPS binding is very easy to measure. You need specialized tests for this. But from my presentation, you can see that LPS binding is absolutely an asset you should use in the selection of the product. So in summary, there is no one answer to this, but there are some criteria you should consider when making a proper mixture for your own use or selecting products you want to use in practice.
Okay.
Would that be an answer?
I think so, yes, absolutely. Thank you very much, Johanna. Mahendran, did you get some questions where you want to answer?
Already I have answered a few questions in already I typed. I have answered. I think most of the questions they directly pointed to Professor Johanna and as well as you. There are direct questions. I think you can start answering.
Okay, Claudia, then I would take the opportunity to answer the next question, which is very much related to this, because there were also the question of different types of probiotics for the detoxification of mycotoxins. It is a little bit the same answer. Yes, they are. A lot of people from academia, but also from industry, have tested a variety of lactobacillus strains. Particular lactobacilli are very good for detoxification of mycotoxins. The difference between these is that some of the strains, this is really on the strain level, have a different efficiency in binding mycotoxins and also have a kind of metabolic process where they can degrade. So you simply have to look into the data you can find in the academic literature or you can find from a company. So this is also a question, there is no black and white answer, but there are differences in products and you simply have to search for the best solution you can get in your own country.
Okay, thank you very much, Johanna. I take also the occasion to answer to a question, and the question is which mycotoxin affects the embryonic mortality and in turn the chick quality. There are many mycotoxins can interfere with embryonic mortality, of course, aflatoxin firstly, but not only aflatoxin, also are important trichotoxins, because all, let's say, mycotoxin or toxins in general that can stimulate the hyperoxidation of particular chemical molecules. For example, very sensitive are the polyunsaturated fatty acid. The polyunsaturated fatty acid can be hyperoxidated by an activity of mycotoxin created aldehyde and alkane, which are very toxic for the cells and creating apoptosis and necrosis of the cells. And the embryo in chick, for example, is full of polyunsaturated fatty acid. The level of polyunsaturated fatty acid in embryo is very high. Therefore, the embryo is very sensitive to be for the mortality because trichotoxins and aflatoxin have this particular activity of hyperoxidation of these polyunsaturated fatty acids, not only aflatoxin and trichotoxins, but these are, I would like to say, are the most important mycotoxin for this activity.